The premise of this video is that the Return of the Jedi doesn't make any sense. Now, as a kid, Return of the Jedi was my favorite Star Wars, and I watched it over and over and over and over again. I watched them all over and over again, but particularly Return of the Jedi. Now, of course, today, my favorite Star Wars movie is The Empire Strikes Back. Again, like I bet it is with a lot of you. But I've had a lot of problems with Return of the Jedi ever since I was first watching it as a kid, and so I want to go over it here because I've talked about it with a lot of other people, and I'm like, you know what? I think I'll just go ahead and make a video on this subject. So I'm going to do a watch through of Return of the Jedi and add my commentary to it as we go, because I think that if Return of the Jedi came out today, we would be very critical of it as far as the plot goes. And in this way, I'm going to have to separate two different things here, and right now I'm using plot and story to separate these, so I guess I'll just use that terminology here. But when I'm talking about the story, I'm talking about something very structured and something that is underneath the physical layer of the story, which is the plot. So according to the plot, we've got a bunch of physical things going on. We've got to rescue Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt. Luke's got to go and reconcile with Master Yoda. The Rebel Alliance has to destroy the second Death Star, and there's got to be this showdown between Luke and Darth Vader. So those are the physical things that are happening, which are the plot. But then underneath that, on a structural level, is the story, and that story is the structure that all those physical things are put on that are kind of giving to us emotionally what we want out of a story. So I also think that Return of the Jedi is actually a great movie to show the distinction between the story and the plot, because we've got a whole bunch of plot holes. And basically, that's what I'm going to be talking about here. If you try to watch what's actually going on in Return of the Jedi, it's got so many plot holes, it's unbelievable. So it's plot problems that I'm particularly talking about here. But what it doesn't have is a lot of, anyway, story problems. I actually like the story that it's trying to tell you. And so the story is a satisfying story, which we'll also talk about in this when it's hitting the different story beats. And so that's what I think we remember. First of all, I think we're probably more forgiving of plot problems when this movie came out. But also, it is an illustration that obviously I think you need to both get the plot and the story right. But in the event that you have to choose, then you should definitely get the story right. You want that underlying structure to be right, and you want the emotional needs and emotional desires of your audience to be fulfilled. And even if you do that at the expense of some plot points, it's still going to be a good movie. It's going to be something that people are going to enjoy. And I think that's kind of our situation with Return of the Jedi. So let's just get into this. This is a minor point that doesn't have to do with the plot, but I've always wondered why this guy is referred to as Commander, this Moff Jerjerrod. I wish they actually used the titles Moff and Grand Moff in the movies. Even Grand Moff Tarkin never got referred to as Grand Moff Tarkin in the movies. What exactly is C-3PO referring to here? He talks about how Lando and Chewbacca never returned from this awful place, meaning Jabba the Hutt's palace. What does he mean by that? We know later that Lando Calrissian has infiltrated Jabba the Hutt's palace as a spy, so they weren't expecting Lando Calrissian to come back, right? And then he says that, well, Chewbacca didn't return from here either, but were they expecting Chewbacca? I don't get it, because Chewbacca doesn't come into the palace until he's brought by Leia disguised as the bounty hunter. So I don't understand this line. I don't think either of those droids should be expecting Lando to have come back, and I actually don't even think they would know that Chewbacca is going in with the bounty hunter. It's unclear how much information is shared between all the different parties trying to do the rescuing here. I think it's awfully strange that there isn't more activity around Jabba the Hutt's palace. You would think there would be a different door, because having this gigantic door closed and then having to open it all the way up anytime anybody wants to come inside, like these two droids, that seems rather strange. You would think there'd be some kind of defended gate or something with people around. Because wouldn't there be a lot of activity around Jabba the Hutt's palace? He is running this, crime syndicate or whatever. Shouldn't there be bounty hunters coming in and out and other people coming in and out all the time? There isn't enough activity around his palace, and it does seem like this is a very impractical door design if this is actually the only way you're supposed to be able to get into Jabba the Hutt's palace. Now we have this scene where R2-D2 delivers the message with C-3PO from Luke Skywalker to Jabba the Hutt. And so he's hopeful that he's going to be able to arrange some way to negotiate for the return of Han Solo encased in carbonite, and he gives as a gift C-3PO and R2-D2 to Jabba the Hutt as a token of his goodwill. Now, I'm not really sure why he did this. This seems like an unnecessary step. Of course, later we do find out that Luke's lightsaber is inside R2-D2, but that seems like a really strange thing to do as well. But the result of his having done that is now that R2-D2 and C-3PO are now the prisoners of Jabba the Hutt, and now are taken to who knows where. Nobody would know where in the world they happen to go to. Now, of course, by chance, it is the case that C-3PO is taken back up to the main audience chamber, and then who knows what happens with R2-D2. He ends up serving drinks for some strange reason. But if Luke does ultimately want to be able to get the droids back, this is a strange thing to do, because Jabba could have done anything with the true droids while he had them in his clutches here. And basically, all we've done is gotten 2 more characters captured by Jabba the Hutt. Now Princess Leia enters the throne room with Chewbacca, Princess Leia disguised as the bounty hunter, and of course we don't know that it is Princess Leia at this time. So this has the effect that the audience is supposed to think that we are in an increasingly desperate situation, because now Chewbacca has been captured by this bounty hunter and is being given to Jabba the Hutt. But this is also going to end up being an extremely ridiculous and kind of high-risk strategy, well, it is a high-risk strategy, for trying to rescue Han Solo. It's another reason that I think that Luke Skywalker and Leia here must not have been coordinating activities, because why would we do this? If Luke Skywalker thinks he's going to be able to negotiate for Han Solo's release, then why would you send Leia inside, particularly with Chewbacca, and get him captured is what's going to happen here, and put another person in Jabba's dungeon? Luke and Leia must not have known that the other one was organizing a rescue attempt. It's at this point, with Chewbacca now being thrown in Jabba's dungeon, that we find out that Lando Calrissian has infiltrated Jabba the Hutt's palace and is posing as one of his palace guards. So, this is a very interesting strategy here, but once again, why exactly did he have to do this? Perhaps he was supposed to get in and find out the layout of the situation inside the palace, find out exactly where Han was, if he was encased in carbonite, and then be able to get back out and share that information with Luke and Leia to actually confirm that Han is there and what it might take to be able to get him out. But for some reason, he doesn't ever relay any information out of the palace. Instead, he just stays within the palace. Now, it could be the case that they intended him to stay within the palace and be a confederate to the conspiracy inside the chamber here, because they're going to need him to be able to do something as one of the palace guards later on. But that never even comes up. So now we have Chewbacca locked in one of the dungeons in Jabba the Hutt's palace, and now all we've basically done so far is get 3 more characters captured by Jabba the Hutt. Because no matter how difficult you think it was going to be to get Han out of there, it's going to be even more difficult to be able to get Han out of there and Chewie out of there when he's in the dungeon, and also the droids out of there. So getting more people captured didn't actually seem to help here. Now we come to the very important scene where Leia, disguised as the bounty hunter, does come up to Han Solo encased in carbonite and hits the buttons in order to unthaw him and release him from his hibernation. I remember being confused by this scene even when I was a kid. I was like, what in the world is going on here? Because, of course, Leia then reveals herself, so everybody knows that it's her, and they get caught. Jabba the Hutt, for some reason, is behind a curtain with C-3PO and the entire rest of his court. We don't really know why that is. He must have suspected something, but we're not told why. He's just behind the curtain. But at any rate, Leia reveals herself to Han Solo, and then they get captured. I remember as a kid asking my mother, what exactly was going on here? Because what's going on doesn't make sense. And I just thought that maybe one day I will be able to reason this through and figure out what's going on. But instead, I just asked Mother, I was like, so what exactly was she trying to do in here? And my mother said that she thought that the plan was for Leia to escape with Han Solo that night. Maybe, but that doesn't make any sense. Let's say that that was the plan, that Leia thought she was going to be able to unthaw him and then make a break for it out of the main gate of the palace. Let's just assume that. Where does that get them? That still leaves the droids captured by Jabba the Hutt and inside his palace, and it also leaves Chewbacca in the dungeon of Jabba's palace in need of rescuing, and then it also Lando Calrissian. Let's just say that since he hasn't been discovered, that he would, when he figured out that that Han was gone like he was supposed to be, if that was the plan, then Lando Calrissian could just exit the palace in disguise. But then what would happen when they all got to the rendezvous point? And Leia, Han, Lando and Han are all there. They're like, you got him out. Yes, rescue successful. Oh, wait. Where are the droids and Chewbacca? Oh, God, we left them in Jabba's palace. So this rescue attempt is absolutely inept. It makes no sense. Now, let's say that they did think that it was going to be this easy to unthaw Han once you found him and knew where he was, and then make a break for him with him outside of the palace. Do you know who could have done that? Lando. Lando is disguised as one of the palace guards and has presumably been accepted in some level. So it just seems like Lando could say, you know what, I found him. I'm one of the palace guards. One night when I'm on, duty in the palace main audience chamber, keeping a lookout on one of the Night's Watch, I'm just going to find the right knight, press this button, and then I'm going to get out of here with Han Solo. No need to get the droids captured, and no need to get Chewbacca captured. Easy as pie. Done and done. But let's say that for some reason you did want Leia to come in, which would be ridiculous. It's not something that you should do. But let's say that Leia was coming in. Why in the world did she have to bring Chewbacca? Like, don't get Chewbacca captured. Like, this place, being Jabba's crime syndicate place, must have bounty hunters coming in and out all the time. Leia's disguised as a bounty hunter. It seems like she should just be able to walk in on other business. Sometimes, hey, you need to check Jabba's job boards, right? Figure out, if there are any new jobs that he's posted or anything like that. Come and see what the news is. So it seems like a great idea to just come to this place disguised as a bounty hunter, scope it out, stay around, however long bounty hunters and that kind of people typically do around here before going off again, scoping things out, and then choosing the right night to hit the buttons on Han Solo and then running out with him. So I'm having trouble coming up with any reason why Leia would think she would need to get Chewbacca captured. Because even if she got Han out, then she'd realize, oh my God, Chewbacca's in the dungeon. And let's say that she didn't realize that Luke was going to get C-3PO and R2-D2 captured. She's probably surprised by seeing R2-D2 and C-3PO there, C-3PO up in the audience chamber. She didn't quite seem like it, but maybe. That's why, if they're not coordinating, they sure are not coordinating in a way that gets a lot of people captured. What was the plan? I don't know. They throw Han Solo in the same dungeon as Chewbacca, and so Chewbacca starts to explain something about Luke Skywalker, and presumably is trying to explain something about the plan, but he'd better not explain too much, otherwise one of the guards might overhear and then, reveal it to Jabba and the whole thing would be spoiled. But Chewbacca does say something about Luke here, so I guess that kind of spoils the theory that they're operating independently, even though I kind of thought that was a stretch anyway. But presumably, Chewbacca has some idea of what the plan is, but we don't really know what he's relating to Han Solo, other than it is something to do with Luke, but we don't know. Now Luke Skywalker shows up in Jabba's palace, and rather than clarify whatever this inane plan is to rescue Han Solo, it only adds to the confusion here, because Luke walks in, and he thinks that he's going to be able to use a Jedi mind trick on Jabba the Hutt, just as he did with Bib Fortuna just a moment ago, in order to convince Jabba to give up Han Solo, and he presumably thinks he's just going to walk out. Several things here. First of all, it does seem like a very convenient plot contrivance that the Jedi mind tricks do not work on Jabba the Hutt. That's a problem with Jedis in general and this mind control power that they've got, which does make them difficult to write. I admit that. That makes it very difficult for them to write. Because if you can just wave your hand and say some kind of suggestion to somebody and get them to do what you want, that does solve a lot of plot problems. And so obviously they did think about this when they were writing Return of the Jedi, that, oh, well, Luke will walk in, say, you need to release Han Solo. Jabba will say, yes, I need to release Han Solo. And then Han Solo will be gone. But for presumably plot reasons, we have a reason why the Jedi mind trick won't work. We're going to forgive Luke for that in this case, because Luke is kind of new to all of this, and he doesn't realize there are some species that the Jedi mind trick doesn't work on. Who we are not going to forgive for that is someone like Qui-Gon Jinn, back in the days of the Republic, when it's just absolutely ridiculous that Jedi would not know and recognize on sight those particular members of the species that their Jedi mind tricks are not going to work on. You would think that Jedi Knights would know that, and especially a Jedi Master like Qui-Gon would know the kinds of species that their mind trick doesn't work on. But even Qui-Gon Jinn can't recognize that in Watto when he looks at him. I mean, whatever. But Luke, since he doesn't have a whole lot of guidance, probably missed that lesson with Obi-Wan and Yoda when he was training, although you'd think that would be a very important lesson to get. But now, also, assuming that Luke thought that this was going to be a super easy rescue attempt, you just walk in, wave your hand, and then walk out with Han, why didn't we start with this? Why isn't this the very first thing that happened? We'll go ahead and give them having Lando in there. Lando could have slipped in there, and then we could have had a scene or something where Lando is transmitting some information out, saying that he found him, he's right here, this is going to be easy, come on in, Luke. And then Lando could leave later. But if that's how easy Luke thought it was going to be, this is what he should have started with. And why in the world would he give them the droids? Because he thought he was just going to walk in, wave his hand, and leave with Han. Why did he need, then, to send the droids? All he did was get them captured. I don't get it. They're trying to make Luke look mysterious and powerful here, though. Luke, when he realizes this isn't going to work, doesn't try additional negotiations. He immediately goes for a blaster. And so he has to grab one off of somebody else in the palace because he's apparently unarmed, because he doesn't have his lightsaber with him. If he thought there was a chance that he was actually going to have to fight and could cut his way out of Jabba's palace with whoever else needs to come with him, you would think he would have come armed. But we know that he's not armed later because he's given his lightsaber to R2-D2. But you'd think in this kind of situation it'd be really handy to have your weapon. But nonetheless, he doesn't. He's dumped into the Rancor pit. And then Luke is also now a prisoner of Jabba. So all we've done is gotten everybody captured. So now they're all captured, and for whatever reason, Jabba seems to play along with them in whatever this weird plan would be by taking them all out to the Sarlacc pit. Their rescue attempt only works because they all go out there. Now, of course, they do kill Jabba in the attempt, but that wasn't known. If Jabba hadn't died out there and he hadn't taken all of the characters out there to the Sarlacc pit, you would still have rescued some and left potentially several others inside the palace. Jabba takes everybody out there, including R2-D2, who doesn't really have any reason to be out there other than to serve drinks. But there's really no reason why R2-D2 needed to come out there on the sail barge. It seems like R2-D2 definitely could have been left behind. And if he was left behind, well, then Luke wouldn't have his lightsaber. This is when it's revealed that R2-D2 is carrying Luke's lightsaber. But there was no reason why this should have worked. There was no reason why R2-D2 was necessarily going to be close, particularly within a range of his spring-loaded lightsaber cannon here, of Luke Skywalker when Luke Skywalker actually needed his lightsaber. If they had left R2-D2 back at the palace, Luke wouldn't have his lightsaber. Moreover, there's no guarantee that Jabba would still even have R2-D2. He could have sold him or traded him off for something else, or torn R2-D2 down for spare parts, in which they would have found Luke Skywalker's lightsaber within. So there's no reason why any of this should have worked. Now there's this big battle where they blow up Jabba's sail barge, kill him, fight off a bunch of his guards, and all managed to escape with all of the characters. So far as I can tell, there was no reason that ever came to fruition anyway for Lando Calrissian to actually have infiltrated Jabba's guards like they did, and rather than cunning and subterfuge getting Han Solo back, we ended up in a battle scene and just cutting and shooting our way out, which, I mean, did work, but did work because all the characters happened to be there and they were able to fight their way out. But I don't know what the rescue plan was. That doesn't make any of that any better. So now we need to look at this from the plot perspective and then the story, which is what I'm talking about, that underlying level as well. From the plot perspective, this was a mess. Like, when you actually go back and look at this like we're doing here and try to figure out what in the world the plan was to rescue Han Solo, it's just a mess. You have no idea. But on the story level, this does satisfy what needed to happen, and I think that's why it has worked for so long. Because Han Solo had been captured, so we had to get him out of Jabba's prison so that he could be back in action for the rest of the movie, and we also needed to establish that Luke Skywalker was a hero. Because when we left Luke Skywalker, he was at a major, major low. You know, he had tried to fight Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back, he had gotten beat up, he'd got his arm cut off, he had chosen to basically kill himself rather than submit to Darth Vader. He did escape from that. You know, he was laying there on the medical bed of the Millennium Falcon, and they got out to the medical freighter. And, you know, Luke was at an all-time low because he had done what his master told him not to do. Don't go, you're not ready. Luke did anyway, and he got beat up, and he had a major loss. So now, coming off of that low with Luke Skywalker, you've got to turn that around and give Luke Skywalker a high. So that's why it had to be Luke who was going to rescue Han here, because he's the one who has something to prove. So even though from the plot perspective, you would have thought that Luke would have walked in, thought he could just Jedi mind trick Jabba, and then leave with Han, and then when that didn't work, That's what he thought could happen. When that didn't work, Luke ended up a prisoner himself, and then, well, you'd end up with Lando and Leia having to rescue both Han Solo and Luke Skywalker. But that won't work for the story, because from the story, it is time for Luke to start turning it around and to being the hero. And that's what this sequence has given us. So plot and story, I hope I'm drawing the kind of distinction here that I want to be drawing and that I'm communicating it well, because here, plot, total disaster. Who knows what's going on here? But story is doing what it needs to do, it's hitting its beats, and it is satisfying its audience. Now we're seeing Luke Skywalker's the hero, all of our characters are back together, and now we're going forward again.